There's a prevailing notion that the best Harry Potter movie tie-in games are Chamber of Secrets for PC and PlayStation 2, which are 2 of the 5 absolutely different game adaptations of the film. After reviewing quite a lot of Harry Potter games, including those 2, I'm here to challenge that notion with a Chamber of Secrets adaptation for Game Boy Color. So does this mean that I'm about to argue that the little and somewhat weird turn-based Harry Potter RPG is the best Harry Potter game that was released alongside the films? Actually, yes, it means precisely that. Chamber of Secrets was developed by Gryptonite Games and is a direct continuation of their Philosopher's Stone title for the same platform. So I'd advise you to first watch that review if you haven't, as for the purposes of saving time, I will draw direct comparisons. Link is in the description and YouTube cards. Without further ado, let's review the Game Boy Color Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, as always with the help of my Stasocritic scoring system, starting with design. This is the most important part of Stasocritic with the biggest weight, 4, as it is all about how the game is played and structured, which is defining for our experience. The Game Boy Color Philosopher's Stone version tried to do many interesting things, but ultimately failed in terms of implementation of its structure and mechanics. Chamber of Secrets has made great strides to iterate on both. In terms of gameplay loops, the biggest change is removal of the crafting aspect. While it was atmospheric, Philosopher's Stone couldn't really properly fit it in, so Chamber of Secrets made the right choice of letting the feature go. Potions are now found mostly through combat and exploration, although you can buy them as well. Chamber of Secrets fixes the self-sufficiency of combat from Philosopher's Stone by making sure that you don't win equipment in random battles, and wizard card and potion rewards are more rare unless you use one of special abilities performed by Ron's Rat, which is a topic we'll tackle a bit later. Sadly, even though the game really solidifies the loop in this iteration, it still stumbles when it comes to economy balancing. The monetary rewards are too small in comparison to the prices of equipment in Weasley's shop. As a result, it is very difficult to actually buy something in your first playthrough. Chamber of Secrets, like its predecessor, does have a New Game Plus possibility, which would make it easier to buy gear in the second run, but honestly, often it's better to just spend money on wizard cards to be able to use card combinations. Regardless, even with the economy balance problems in mind, Chamber of Secrets does a better job at making every facet of the game more meaningful. And though it is tricky to gain enough money to purchase equipment, you still get some gear through optional quests. Which leads us to the pacing of the adventure. Chamber of Secrets provides a much healthier mix of minigames, fetch quests and dungeon roaming than its predecessor. There's a couple more proper side activities now other than just collecting wizard cards. You have the dueling club, a whole trading sequence and a few side quests. Maybe not a lot, but it's enough to spruce up the gameplay. Likewise with minigames, they're pretty simple. There is gnome throwing, quidditch, flying on a car, ghost head bowling, but they are done very well and are pretty fun for distraction. While dungeons or dungeon-like environments are just rudimentary labyrinths with random enemies and a boss at the end, they're not very big and work well enough to facilitate the most important part of the game, which is combat. First, absolutely every combat issue I have listed in the previous video has been addressed. Philosopher's Stone had long drawn-out animations with weird pauses between each action. No such thing here, everything flows very nicely. In Philosopher's Stone, you couldn't really understand what spells were good against which creatures. Well, Chamber of Secrets adds a special screen, Follow Bruti, that holds information about every enemy, including their resistances and weaknesses. And you fill that book up by using an Informer spell on the enemy you encounter. Instead of a purely word-based list, which would make it easy to confuse spells like Vermilius and Verdimillius together, Chamber of Secrets introduces icons, making it obvious which spell you're selecting and whether you can actually cast it or not based on its grayed-out state. It would have been preferable if spells that characters haven't learned yet would also be absent from the list, but that's a small nitpick. Each card combination now has a clear description of what its actual effect will be, allowing you to use this strategically without guesswork. And finally, enemy distribution is much more sensible. Not only has Chamber of Secrets fixed every important issue with combat from Philosopher's Stone, it added one new important mechanic: different party members. Most of the time you will be accompanied by Ron and Hermione, although at some point even Gilderoy Lockhart will be in your party too. Each character has their own special abilities. Ron can send his pet rat Scabbers for different purposes, ensure that at the end of the battle you'll win some potions or wizard cards, stun enemies, and so on. His disadvantage is the broken wand that can randomly backfire, being very true to the source material. Hermione has special lecturing moves which can give offensive or defensive buffs to other party members, as well as increase the overall XP you receive from a battle. And even Lockhart has a special ability of his own to stun enemies by giving them an autograph. The ability to use wizard card combinations stays unique to Harry though. Party members not only add a layer of depth to the overall combat thanks to their abilities you can strategically use, but also know it makes sense to use a larger variety of spells. In Philosopher's Stone, most of the time it was beneficial to just keep attacking the enemies because using non-damaging spells or potions would more often than not make the situation worse, as you wouldn't be able to win the battle for attrition. But in Chamber of Secrets, thanks to the addition of party members, spells like Petrificus Totalus actually have strategic uses against, let's say, bosses. Despite all the improvements, the game still stumbles a bit. Some optional spells that you can find like Scourge are really useless even when casted on creatures it's supposed to be effective against, but honestly the biggest issue is the fact that you won't be using any spells in the final boss battle at all. Your one casting is replaced by Sword of Gryffindor instead, which will do 0 damage by the way if you happen to not have enough strength. Luckily, right before the boss battle there's an area where you can grind some levels for a bit should you need them. But it's really disappointing that the end of the game just forgoes the main spellcasting meat of the combat system. Sure, you can still use wizard card combinations, but that doesn't save the situation. There are aspects outside of combat that aren't fleshed out either. For example, each floor in Hogwarts now gives you access to a map, which helps greatly with understanding where you need to go. But there is no map to the outside grounds, so you still have to roam around the first time you need to reach a certain location to understand where it is. Then there is also the matter of shortcuts. I don't remember how many floor shortcuts did Philosopher's Stone have, but it was for sure more than 2 like in the Chamber of Secrets, which can make the process of going to the correct floor quite cumbersome as you have to walk up different staircases a lot. Not to mention that pretty important parts of the game are in a way lacking. There is nothing to the dungeon labyrinths except enemies. Fetch quests are just about reaching a certain concrete point or person, no puzzles or investigative aspects. There are certainly plenty of ways Chamber of Secrets could improve, but all in all, should you open up all the scores for design, I will assign a 7. The game is focused mostly on turn-based combat, and some caveats aside, that aspect is done very well. Now, the overall connective tissue between those combat sessions might be called a bit simplistic, but it is enjoyable enough and paced well. Certainly a huge amount of effort has gone into ensuring that the interesting direction of Philosopher's Stone Game Boy Color title was implemented in as high quality as possible, and that's admirable. Now let's move on to context. This is a category that has a weight of 1 because it is about things that enhance the experience rather than define it: plot, characters, motivation, writing, etc. We're focusing here on how well the game represents the context on its own, without assuming knowledge of the source material, except, since this is a sequel, assuming knowledge of the Philosopher's Stone movie or book is absolutely fine. Different Harry Potter movie teen games would adapt the source material with varying degrees of success, but even when experiencing the better examples, players would benefit a lot from watching the movie or reading the book beforehand. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets for Game Boy Color is very unique among its game adaptation peers in that it is the only tie-in that works absolutely well if you experience it standalone without knowing anything about Chamber of Secrets beforehand. Well, to be fair, at the moment of writing this, there are still some game adaptation versions for other movies that I haven't played, but I doubt that any of them will come close to the quality of the story in this version of Chamber of Secrets. Should I be wrong, I will be sure to correct myself in a pinned comment, of course. This Chamber of Secrets version has a proper setup, progression, every plot point is introduced when necessary and reaches its proper conclusion, no character just appears or disappears out of nowhere, everything makes sense. Which is not to say that absolutely every relevant element from the book, which is the main source of this game's inspiration rather than the movie, is present. For example, the themes of belonging and choice are never really explored. Sure, people have their suspicions about Harry, but he is never really ostracized for being able to talk to snakes and always getting caught near the place where someone would get petrified. The dialogue with the sorting hat where Harry wonders if he was sorted into the right house or not is simply absent as well. But, that being said, whichever points sadly didn't make it into the story don't actively hurt the game. You never get the feeling that something is missing, so should you go into the title with literally zero knowledge about Chamber of Secrets, you will be absolutely fine. In fact, when it comes to dialogue writing, the game is even more enjoyable than the source material, I would say. For example, this is the moment where Hermione first meets Harry and Ron. This amazing traffic violation line is not in the source material. When Nick the Ghost asks Harry to tell Sir Patrick how frightening Nick is, this is what the exchange in the book amounts to. "I think," said Harry hurriedly at a meaningful look from Nick, "Nick's very frightening and, Huh," yelled Sir Patrick said, "but he asked you to say that." That's it. Now take a look at the same moment from the game. It has so much more life to it. And honestly, like in the Chamber of Secrets movie, the friendship between the three main characters is felt here more so than in the book they are based on, which is definitely a plus as far as I'm concerned. There are plenty of moments that never happened in the book because the game needed reasons for there to be additional gameplay sections included, and most of the time they fit very well. They don't get transformed into huge unnecessary side plots, but rather work as extensions of existing goals. Some cute references to the previous game are present too, which makes it feel like a proper sequel to the game rather than just a separate adaptation of the source material, which is a sequel. And as a cherry on top, there are tons of side conversations with students in the world. While Philosopher's Stone also has this aspect, Chamber of Secrets really doubles down on it. After every completed main goal, the students at Hogwarts will have something different to say related to your next mission. It's great. All in all, should you open up all the scores for context, I will assign an 8. The writing is very enjoyable, the plot makes sense, which I know sounds weird, but when it comes to adaptations like this, it is actually important. And while some themes from the source material are absent, which is the main reason why the score is not higher, experiencing the narrative of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets is still a joy in this interpretation. Let's discuss aesthetics. This is another category with a weight of 1, as it is again about things that enhance the experience rather than define it, this time through visual style, music, etc. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone for GBC had two big issues that have affected its aesthetic enjoyment. The first is how every floor of Hogwarts looked very similar. Now, there are far more differentiators between each floor in terms of their ground textures and objects in the hallways and how everything is lit up that it doesn't feel as samey. As a result, the environments feel far less repetitive. It helps that somehow Chamber of Secrets has managed to put in even more battle screen backgrounds and the likes than Philosopher's Stone did. Just an insane amount of details. And animation work is as fantastic as it was before, now with the added bonus of it not slowing down gameplay, so that's great as well. The wizard card combination animations also feel much more epic in nature. The second issue Philosopher's Stone game had is a very repetitive soundtrack with the same few leitmotifs reused over and over again. Now, of course, Chamber of Secrets also repeats some of its leitmotifs where it makes sense, like how the Hogwarts exploration theme changes tonality as you switch floors. But overall, the musical variety is far bigger and it is really great. If there is a sort of caveat I can mention, it's that a lot of battle music doesn't really sound Harry Potterish, like for example this one. But really, it is only a minor gripe against what is one of the best looking and sounding GBC games ever. And while I am personally not a huge fan of the art style myself, I find it very fitting to the tone of the source material and it's implemented in a high quality way, so can't complain there. So should you open up all the scores, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets definitely gets assigned at 10. If I understand correctly, in some regions this was the last Game Boy Color title to be ever released, and it is definitely a great send-off that shows what this platform is capable of in terms of graphics and sound. Time to move on to Cohesion. This category has a weight of 2, and it's about how well a game puts together all of its elements in a way that would create a wholesome, holistic experience. Philosopher's Stone for GBC has successfully created a game where you feel like you're in a school for wizards, and also made sure that a lot of RPG tropes would make sense within the context of the Harry Potter world. Like with other aspects, Chamber of Secrets goes a step further and tries to make sure that its game design represents the story and characters. A really good example are the special abilities, like Hermione's lecture moves. They're a perfect blend of a buff mechanic with her character who does lecture Harry and Ron and helps the trio with finding information. Another great example of mechanical and atmospheric blending is the Informus spell to find the opponent's weaknesses and resistances. It has a clear mechanical use, but also fits with the overall theme of learning and getting knowledge in a school for wizards. About monsters and magical beings, of course, but they're a part of this world too. There are some weird things even in the context of this game's setup, like for example the path to Dumbledore's office being filled with random monsters to fight. I know that in the context of the game's logic, random enemies appear only in empty rooms with no other people, but it feels somewhat weird when a teacher sends you to the principal only for you to fight your way through. But still, what Chamber of Secrets does is enough to assign an 8 to it. It's wonderful that the game is not afraid to have the narrative of the source material and the mechanics of the game play off each other, even when it's for some really disadvantageous for players things, like Ron's wand randomly backfiring. But it's important because it makes everything feel more connected together as an overall experience, rather than just being an engaging game. Speaking of engagement, it's time for the emotions category. This category of Stasocritic is all about personal feelings, so it is the most subjective part of the overall system. But personal feelings are extremely important, which is why it has the second biggest weight, 3. I will be honest, playing through this version of Chamber of Secrets has been a great surprise to me. People barely ever discuss this adaptation, mostly the versions that are remembered are for PC and PlayStation 2, and also PS1, though more people remember Philosopher's Stone for that platform. This Chamber of Secrets GBC game is frequently mentioned as a very unique experience, but I can't say I have ever seen people call it the best Harry Potter tie-in. But it is! By this time I have played 18 out of 27 Harry Potter games that were released as direct movie adaptations. One of them, Prisoner of Azkaban for GBA, I have played but didn't make a video about it yet. And sure, I haven't played absolutely every tie-in yet, but honestly, based on what I have seen, I really doubt that among those I still have to play, there is a game that's as good as this one. At most they're going to be promising but flawed. I suppose we'll see, I might be wrong. But this version of Chamber of Secrets not only has solid enjoyable gameplay, but also the best interpretation of an existing Harry Potter story in a game. Again, that I have experienced so far. Some details and aspects are even better than the source material, I would say. To be absolutely fair, by the time I finished the game, I was starting to get a bit tired of the combat due to some spells being quite useless, as I've mentioned in the design section, and the structure starting to get a little bit stale. There's only so much variety you can have with labyrinths and quests that have no puzzles or something to avoid a degree of repetitiveness. Which becomes evident in combat as well. I've been using the same moves over and over again a lot of times. But still, there is enough depth to sustain the campaign length of 7 hours. Will I replay the game? Actually, yeah, I think so, but not immediately. I might start the New Game Plus sometime in the future. I'm certain I will still enjoy it. So should you open up all the scores for emotions, I will assign a 9. This is just a very good and well done game that's quite enjoyable. Now, let's summarize everything. After all scores and their weights are taken into account, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets for Game Boy Color gets a final Stasocritic rating of 79. It's just a really well done, solid game, and definitely one of the better licensed titles out there. What's great about this version of Chamber of Secrets is that it can be enjoyed even if you don't know anything about Chamber of Secrets. Some basic knowledge of the world from Philosopher's Stone is probably needed. This is an adaptation of a sequel after all, but it doesn't take much to understand the important background information. And look, my Stasocritic system is balanced in such a way that most games would actually land at a score range of around 60 and 70. As such, 80+ games are really great examples of their genres, and Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets for Game Boy Color is really close to that, with some gameplay caveats preventing it from getting there. Sure, they're easily forgivable, but can't deny their presence. That said, you might remember I mentioned in previous videos that some other Harry Potter games are forgotten classics. But honestly, now that I've played Chamber of Secrets for Game Boy Color, there is no classic as forgotten as this story-focused turn-based RPG. It's just a really good game and deserves more recognition.